Okay, we are live. Hello, my friends. And hello, everyone. Okay, so first of all, I would like to be a bit faithful to my method text and say that how I'm feeling. And therefore, then we'll invite you to say how you're feeling too, because I have been the whole day very anxious and very, very anxious. And now I'm actually listening to a lot of things going on, a lot of sounds, So I've been very anxious because it's my first time that I do a live. And it's my first time that I moderate a discussion with 5 people. And it's me with 4 Brits speaking in English. So I feel vulnerable, but saying so, expressing that will help me to pass on to something else. So, yeah. So the aim of this talk, now for the public, is to present our project and film Wonderland, The Art of Becoming Human, authored by Professor Amanda Ravitz here with us, now subtitled in Italian, and then share our experiences, thoughts, and findings, and research findings around the process of recovery by means of contemporary art practices, in this case, photography and film. Now, before introducing the speakers and myself, I'll just read an introduction of the project written by Amanda Ravitz. Wonderland, The Art of Becoming Human is an artistic photographic research project by and for people in recovery from substance use disorder and/or mental health issues. It is part of a new Northwest UK social movement under the proactive slogan of Recoverism, allied to the arts, harnessing social change and emancipation by reframing cultural identities around substance use disorder. I would say, and this is mine, in other words, challenging stigma and the labels and stereotypes associated with addiction and mental health. Again, this is Amanda writing, working with artist Cristina Nuñez, myself, and her photo self-portrait method, the self-portrait experience. Researchers, partners, and participants came together in Manchester in 2016 to find out how artistic photographic research can further recovery journeys. The research produced a film authored by Amanda Ravitz, a series of self-portraits, work by Nuñez, a Research in Film Award nominated film directed by Amanda Ravitz with artist Huw Wahl, a series of artist books, academic articles, and an online exhibition. Findings from the project were showcased interactively at the Utopia Fair in Somerset House in London in June 2016. Wonderland is a partnership between Professor now Amanda Ravitz of Manchester School of Art, who was project PI, Mark Prest of Portrait of Recovery, Michaela Jones from Into Recovery, now Scottish Recovery Consortium, Alistair Sinclair from UK Recovery Federation, Lucy Wright from the East Coast Recovery, members of the Greater Manchester Resilience Forum and UK Recovery Federation. Is that all correct? Okay. Okay, Mark, would you define what is a recoverist and what is recoverism?
When I founded Portraits of Recovery, which is a visual arts organisation that looks at addiction and recovery, there was kind of a need to call the art or the art movement, and it kind of took quite a few years really, and eventually I kind of came up with this term recoverism, which is a play on art movements and recoverist. And so I guess what that speaks to is activism as art, so the political, the social, because ultimately the work's about social and cultural change, but it's also looking at recovery as attached to a kind of cultural platform, and how the arts can reframe marginalized groups or communities, such as the recovery community, like ours, like the LGBT plus community have, like the disabled, like women, like black and other ethnic minority groups have. They've reframed, reinvented themselves, and taken back control.
Great, thank you. Now this is very useful. Now I'm going to introduce our guests. So Mark's definition of recoverism is crucial to understand these introductions. Okay, Professor Amanda Ravitz is initiator of the project. Amanda Ravitz trained as an artist and visual anthropologist. She often works with artists using a mixture of methods to explore sensory knowledge in different social settings, including early years education and with people in recovery. She's a research professor in the Department of Art and Performance at Manchester School of Art. Mark Prest is a man in recovery, curator and recovery activist. In 2011, as a response to his lived experience and professional background in the arts, he founded the UK, Manchester-based international visual arts charity Portraits of Recovery. The organization's work looks at the intersectionality of contemporary art, substance use, and recovery for more authentic forms of self-representation. POR does this, POR is Portraits of Recovery, through visual arts, commissioning, and through partnerships in the recovery, health, academic, and community sectors, engaging with those in recovery and the wider public. Michaela Jones began her recovery journey in June 2008. Michaela is interested in all aspects of the recovery movement, but gravitates particularly towards increasing the visibility of people in long-term recovery. Michaela would describe herself as a recoverist, and I would add a recovery activist at the Scottish Recovery Consortium. Yeah. Jane is a woman in long-term recovery, 8 years free of all mind-altering substances, but prefers to describe herself as a recoverist and a recovery sister, mom of 2 and proud feminist survivor of prostitution, domestic and sexual violence. Recovery has been a process of renewing and creating connections with others and with values to live by. Art has been an important part of her recovery, and she has collaborated in many art projects with Mark Prest and POR. So how's that? Yeah, now would you all want to talk about your experience in Wonderland with the project? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who wants to start?
Amanda?
Did you say one line, Christina?
One line?
Did you say talk about your experience in one line?
In Wonderland.
In Wonderland, I said. Yeah, with the project, with the Wonderland project. Forgive me my English.
No, it's quite a bad connection here. I'm sorry if I'm dropping out or something. The description that you gave at the beginning, which I wrote, is a very kind of formal research-facing description that has also some language in there that I don't think I would use now. This stuff about substance misuse, blah, blah. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it feels very alien now. So I just want to start by saying that it makes a lot of sense, but also there are things in there that feel a little bit kind of clumsy or kind of outside now. But I'll just say a little bit about how it started. So what I remember, I have this very vivid memory of being outside a gallery in Manchester, UK, on a wet, rainy night and meeting Mark Prest for the first time out there, and us striking up a conversation and having an immediate kind of affinity, and realizing that we were out. The exhibition was Melanie Mancho, so it was another artist who'd made. Mark had commissioned this piece of work called 12, and we wanted to work. I think we knew we wanted to work together straight away, and we're both interested in kind of liminality and in process, in kind of showing the process behind the work of art, if you like. And very soon after that, I identified a funding stream that would allow us to do Wonderland. And then we put together partnerships with all those organisations you read out the names of. We got in touch with you, Christina. We wanted to work with an artist who had experience themselves of recovery, who had a very clear methodology where we could really think about process with you and with all the partner organisations. And then we, as I remember it, and I think I've written it down somewhere, we were really keen to have a co-production methodology and to create a sort of emergent space that would draw on the lived expertise of the recoverists and the research expertise of academics and the production values of yourself as an artist and of Mark's values as a curator. And so for me, from my sort of point of view, it was about trying to hold that space and those relationships and then see what came out of that in a research way that would inform artistic research and how artistic research can make a contribution to other kinds of research, because in arts and health research, it's often the science, the biomedical part of the research that is privileged, that gets all the funding, that is thought of having this sort of gold standard. And the art bit is sort of bolted on, and it's just there to, make people feel okay about things or sort of smooth things over. And we wanted to show that artistic research has something really equally valid to give, and it has its own language and its own need to be sort of felt and understood and expressed. So, yeah, that was the starting point for it.
Great. Yeah, Michaela.
So I'll go next because I feel that I should confess that before I'd sort of got involved in this project, I knew Mark. But before I got involved in the project, I wasn't a believer in it. I could not see the connection between art and recovery. So, I came into this as a non-believer. And so for me, this whole process, I think, was in many different ways, but perhaps, for today's discussion, it actually opened my eyes to that art, the creative aspect of recovery, how important that is, and how little that aspect even figures in many people's recovery journeys. And I found it quite an incredibly liberating, which we might come back to later, but also quite a transformative experience. And it remains, I think, for me, one of the real, in your recovery journey, I think you can identify key points at which you have a sort of almost a bit of a revelation. And that was one of my sort of key revelatory moments. So I went in a sort of cynic and came out much more of a true believer. So, it wasn't just we weren't just talking about transformation, we were undergoing transformation. And I think that's why the filming process was so important. I think you saw that transformation happen.
Great, thanks. Jane?
Yeah, I mean, I have an arty background because I'd studied furniture design, and I was looking forward to the project, but really clueless about what was going to happen. And I understood there was a therapeutic value in making art, but I didn't really get that we were making a conversation
with art, and the art, it all became one. So I came into it probably with some preconceptions, and just was blown away by what I experienced on it. And yeah, I echo what Michaela said, really transformational. And yes, again, it's on my recovery timeline. You know, there are certain dots, aren't there, like you stuck a pin in. That was a big one. I mean, obviously getting involved with poor is one of the best things I've ever done, and creativity's really become a big part of my recovery, and hopefully much more in the future as well. So I've got Wonderland to thanks for the confidence, really, to start believing in that.
Jane, yesterday you were talking about how you were looking at yourself.
Yes.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, I'd never had a very good image of myself physically, and I didn't have very good self-esteem, and in fact therapists can pinpoint all sorts of clear schemas, but I used to literally, if I caught an accidental glimpse of myself in a shop window, you know, these plate glass windows, my tummy would turn over. I'd have a horror reaction, and I didn't really like looking at myself in a mirror. And what we did in the project was we learnt to look at ourselves as as the art, and we saw ourselves as part of a composition. We saw the story that was speaking, the message that was speaking, and we were able to talk about ourselves in the third person, and be able to appreciate ourselves as we were, and we were going through things like we were expressing fear and disgust, and I'm getting a little bit of an echo of me there, so I hope you're not. And what happened was that ability to step out of yourself and see yourself as the piece of art totally changed my view of my body and my face, and it totally changed some of the feelings that I had, the things like having to hide my body. I put on a lot of weight when I got into recovery. It totally changed that, so I became much more relaxed, never felt that I had to hide who I was in any way, and I mean, you can't get much more transformative than that, of feeling very okay about looking at yourself and knowing that you're looking at the person you love, who is also got a very good and valid and beautiful part of the frame, whether it's a mirror frame, whether it's a frame on a screen, on a camera. It's important to be there, and that's just massive.
Great. Mark.
Well, I guess in many ways, Amanda's kind of outlined some of my role in the project, and of course this came about through our meeting, but I've worked with each of you in different ways. You know, art has brought us all together. You know, I'm always a great believer in that it collects a like-minded body of people. You know, you were all believers to begin with, apart from the atheist Michaela, who's now a true believer and worships at the altar of Recoverism, you know. But I guess for me, what was different about this project, apart from the collaboration, the project management, curation, was actually, it was the first time that I participated in one of my own projects. So I'd always, in a way, been kind of on the outside looking in. So with this project, I actually participated like everybody else, and for the first time really sampled the true value of the very work that I was kind of creating. And so in terms of my own recovery and very many things that Jane said, it was quite transformational for myself as well. In terms, you know, I struggled with kind of self-image, you know, and this project was very much around looking at the other self, or the self that we don't want to see in the mirror, or that we see as ugly, repulsive, repugnant, you know. And I remember Christina, once a conversation with Christina, and Christina said she photographed her ugliness until she got to the point where she found it a value and a beauty. And I think that's really, really, really true, that you get beyond, through the methodology we used in the project, Christina's methodology, we got beyond this kind of what contemporary society kind of thinks we should, I can't think of the words, present of ourselves. The smiley happy pictures on Facebook. I remember once when I posted an image I'd taken on Facebook, and my sister sent me a message, really alarmed, saying, "You can't post images like that. You only post happy images on Facebook." And I was on the floor laughing, you know, because it was a fantastic reaction, because the work was was totally not about that, you know. It was kind of beyond this kind of certain aesthetic, you know, and I mean, as a result of the project for me, I guess my own artist identity started to re-emerge, because I originally trained as an artist, but I hadn't inhabited that role since 1995, and but I also photographed myself every day for a 12-month period from one birthday to the next, because I have a social anxiety disorder, and specifically in the morning. So I'd photographed myself on waking, you know, looking the worst ever, but seeing a real value, an aesthetic value, and looking beyond the surface, really, which is what Christina's work is about. So in a sense, I wasn't looking at me, I was looking at something else. So there was a step back, a distance, if you like, if that makes sense. And but going back to the project, I guess, you know, in terms of some of the partners and some of the people, you know, the work I do with Portraits of Recovery is very much about broadening out the recovery agenda through partnership working. You know, how working with people like Amanda in academia kind of exposes academics or universities to our people, our communities, and it's that experiential which kind of overcomes the stigma, because we are just but people, you know. And so, you know, someone once said to me, what you do, Mark, is you put people together and step back and look at what happens, and and that ripple effect, you know. And I think we've talked lots about how differently this work, these relationships that have formed, have touched our lives and can continue to do so, you know. And that's very much about the process. I'm very much interested in process as art, this ethereal, the thing that you can't see, the connections, the conversations that go on in and around, you know.
Great, thanks. Do you want to add something, Michaela, or shall I talk about what was Wonderland for me? Because they've said something. Yeah, well, I don't know. You want to add something?
No, I mean, I said sort of in my thing, you know, it led me to do things. And I think, you know, Mark, you talked a bit about looking at yourself in a different way, and so did Jay. And one thing we went on to do as part of this project was actually really look at ourselves. So, we took images, a few of us took images of ourselves naked with various things projected and stuff. And that was like the last taboo for me. And it was, that again was also really liberating. I never ever thought that first of all, I would be able to look at myself, and then secondly, show myself to others. And so that sort of reiterates that kind of thing about art busting taboos, but also busting your own taboos about yourself. You know, that the actual image that you might carry of yourself isn't really who you are at all. You're actually very, very different to that. So that was really fascinating for me as well. You know, showing my bits and bobs to the world was probably, again, one of those like really liberating moments. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's all nothing, you know, this is all, we need to, and it's about, I suppose in a way it ties back to that whole visibility thing for me. It's about being visible, and being visible means you don't have shame. So what are the ways you get rid of shame? I still have a lot of guilt and shame about my addiction, and the things, almost like exposing that guilt and shame makes that guilt and shame go away. So that was the other thing that I got out of it. By looking at myself, my guilt and shame floated away. I still have it sometimes late at night, but it's not to the degree that it was, and it's helped me be visible, you know. So that was interesting as well. And as Mark said, for someone that suffers from social anxiety, to get their kids off and show pictures of people, it was like the ultimate in social anxiety is now busted. You know, after I've done that, I can pretty much do anything, you know. Don't know, Jane's nodding as well. Amanda, was that true for you? You have to tell the story, Amanda, about what happened when we were in the studio.
I'll tell the story a bit later. I will tell the story, and we could even share some of the images. But I just wanted to say something about the utopian nature. But there's a lot of feedback.
Do you have, by chance, the Facebook open? Because you should shut it down. No?
I don't have it open, no. But maybe someone else does. Mark, you're not muted. What are you playing at?
Because I had my Facebook open before, and now I shut it down, and it's better when I talk.
Yeah, no, I haven't got it open. Okay, so just that it was set up. I suppose it was partly because of the funding stream, which was about Utopia, but it really seemed a fantastic match for what we wanted to do because of the hope in that sort of bound up in, you know, in recovery and also in art. And there's this idea of anticipatory consciousness that Block talks about in terms of art, a sort of space where human beings can dream. And I think there's something else that I wrote, a few notes about that. So this anticipatory consciousness for Block, all art that has something to say to humankind is utopian. And then I said daydreaming taken into the production of art and literature is a space where human beings conceive of their most important questions to themselves and portray ways to achieve their related objectives. And I think that's a really important part of this project because it's all about that space. So the process isn't just a material process. It's that process of anticipatory space where we begin to pose those questions to ourselves in new ways, and art is very much part of that.
Great, thanks. Okay, for me, Wonderland was really so important that my PhD is full of Wonderland. So it was very important for my research, and it was very important to understand that I am still, even after 30 more years, a recovering addict. Because Mark Press told me one day, you know, like, you are in recovery. And I was saying, well, I mean, it's like 30 something years that I don't do heroin. So I have recovered, you know. But then, so I understood, well, working with Mark, we worked on another project before Wonderland, which was an European project that Mark started. I am Memoirs of Addiction Recovery. But anyhow, I started really to realize that recovery is lifelong, and more, like this year, actually, I'm understanding that recovery to me is the meaning of life. Like we're here to evolve and recover, not to just, lead a nice life, and we're here to recover. And sometimes I realize that I sort of do some harm to myself, like this sort of tendency to self-destruction. Of course, it's not so bad as it used to be, and it might be like smoking cigarettes, and it might be like having a beer in the evening, one beer. I mean, so, but and then, or perhaps I'm having coffee every day, and then for a while I do that, and then my body starts hurting, and then I say, okay, I must recover from that. So I sort of find excuses to recover. I think that the project allowed me to be very conscious of what recovery is, of what recoverism is, and how we recoverists can do something. Not only we're not, useless for society, but we can be extremely useful. So as addicts, we were useless for society, perhaps not, but like we provoked some mirroring anyway. But now as recoverists, we have something to do. And actually, this was the reason why I wanted to do this talk, and I proposed this talk but we will talk about COVID later. Perhaps I'm going to just very briefly say what we did, because I think that people would want to know, what is it that you did? Of course, they might have seen the film or not, but what we did was a 2-week workshop. It was 1 week, and then a month went by, right? And then another week, so that participants would have time to produce images. So first of all, we did several self-portrait sessions in a studio at the Manchester School of Art. We had this studio, and first of all, we did the emotions exercise individually. Then we did the relationship exercise in couples. And then we did the group self-portraits, in which every participant decided how he or she wanted to be photographed with the group. But SPECS is not only the production of these self-portraits, it is also a very structured work on the perception of the images. And this was done first individually with me, and then in the group. So together each participant was sharing their own images, and others were giving their perceptions. And so participants were experiencing this change of perception, this broadening of self-perception, and also the broadening of other people's perceptions. So you would see others like perhaps you haven't seen them, and you would see yourself as you haven't seen yourself. So it was this broadening of perception, which is, according to the research on desistance from crime, for example, they say that the broadening of self-perception is the prerequisite for change. Because of course you see yourself, you see this whole potential, and therefore change is possible. So this is what we did, but during the project, so this is what SPECS is, and then SPECS is also the production of autobiographical projects, which were in the form of artist books, which is what I said before, and the artist books are just amazing. I mean, we're going to copy the link of the online exhibition so that people can see more of the project and can see the books as well, but then there's the other part, which is the film, the making of the film, and I would ask Amanda to explain how that was done, and how actually you asked me to film something that nobody else had filmed, which is entering the studio and filming while people are taking the self-portraits. And that was really amazing as well. So would you like to expand a little bit more on the process of the film?
Yeah. So Huw, who's a filmmaker, and so he was, you know, I suppose he was director of photography or whatever. And I think that just to start with, that relationship is important to factor into this, because we've worked together a lot. And so there was a kind of understanding about the importance of creating a space. So that's the first thing that I want to say, that making a space in which the filmmaking could happen, so that it wasn't just some external observation where you're kind of, you just blend into the background. I mean, I guess that happened to an extent, but we really tried to use what I've learned from observational cinema, which is that in observational cinema, quite opposite to the idea that it's about a kind of voyeuristic observation, it's about devotion. So observational cinema is developed by Herb de Joya and David Hancock in the 1960s and 70s, which is an anthropological method that I was taught to use, is about devotion. So you only film people who you love or you can come to love. So there is that notion of observance in almost a religious sense of observance. So that is the prerequisite for all the other things, which is to try and be in that space and using your feelings and your felt sense around everything that happens, and picking up on very, you know, what may be very small things, small gestures, looks between people, the fact that some people are not speaking, why are they not speaking, what are they feeling, all of those things. But in terms of how we work with you, Cristina, in your process, yes, we asked you, we invited ourselves, if you like, we asked for your permission to film in the studio. So what you normally do is you leave people in the studio on their own with the camera, and it's just them and the camera. You've given them their provocation, their brief, you know, you've made them feel comfortable and uncomfortable with what they have to do, and then it's them and the camera. And we asked if we could have another camera in there, rolling, if you like. So not with the film, not with the operator, as I remember it. Yeah, so everyone left the room, but there were two cameras. So there was the stills camera, your camera, but there was our camera as well, which had all been, you know, set up in a way that would capture not just that moment of capture, but everything around it. And I guess, I don't know, you maybe hadn't seen that before. So this was something new to you.
To me, it was a sacred moment that I didn't want. Actually, some other journalist, I remember, asked me if they could do that, and I said no. But this time, it was the research project that I was very interested in. And in fact, I have actually investigated into that sequence of the film. In terms of the performativity of how we pose and what we do in front of the camera, you know, and how we look for the emotion. So it was just so fascinating to see that. And it was the right moment to do that. So I'm happy that I hadn't done that before, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that sort of thing of being unsettled and not knowing what it is you're giving away and risking is, of course, a really important part of your method anyway. I mean, there's having done something before, the emergent knowledge. Oops, don't know if you can still hear me there. Did I freeze?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, and then we also filmed the classroom, as I would call it, work, because we were in a classroom, I guess. We were in the art school, we were in a kind of art studio, quite a small room, quite a hot room, as I remember. A lot of us packed in there. We wouldn't do that now in COVID times, not at the moment. And, well, I mean, what I loved about being part of that and filming that was what you did, Christina, is that you took people through a kind of process which I completely would identify with the process that we might take our master's students through, our Masters of Photography students. Like, you know, how are you seeing this image? I mean, you will talk about, I don't want to, you know, say things that you might want to say, but it was a kind of visual education that you were, you know, of the high level, you very, very, you know, high expectations. And, you know, and of course, people are absolutely able to respond to that. So, I mean, I found that very exciting as well. And the things that we were looking for there were, yeah, it was just the gestures, often the things that are said without words, that people are communicating in that space around how they're feeling a little bit uncomfortable or mirroring each other or sympathetic or, you know, exposed, all those things. I'll leave it there.
Great. What else? Now, shall we think about the benefits, actually, that because you Amanda, you did this research and you wrote several papers in which you mentioned the benefits, among other things. You were mentioning the benefits of Wonderland. Do you want to talk about that?
I can. I mean, I feel that what everybody, you know, I feel that 4 years on, so the thing that I've got something here that I wrote, or I've kind of reworked a little bit, that was written probably quite soon after the project. But I mean, it was just really interesting listening to what Michaela and Jane were saying earlier on about what they got from it, because, and Mark, because I think I think that they are more sophisticated in understanding what it, you know, what the value is than I am, actually. But I'll for what it's worth, I'll tell you what I've got.
Yeah, because this includes the 10 participants, because we didn't say that there were 10 participants.
Yeah.
And I think that your research will give a sort of a wider scope.
Yeah, and it's a slightly different kind of language, I suppose. So the evaluation of the project. So after the project, during the project, we did an evaluation, and we did it as conversations between participants rather than kind of interviews or surveys. We did a bit of that, but really we set up conversations between participants. And so based on that, then I think there were a number of things about the value to the participants, but also to the fields of recovery and artistic research. So working with visual media, in this case, working with photography with Christina in ways that often decentered language or decentered words was really powerful because, and this is something that Jane particularly picked up on in the evaluation, words can be used to deny what we're feeling. You know, no, I'm not really feeling that. You know, you can lie with words. I remember Jane saying that. So working with emotions without words, with visual media, meant that things could be felt and expressed that people were able to, you know, allow to come to the surface. You said something, Jane, about it being on your skin, about things being on your skin rather than being lied about verbally. I remember that.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I know that I could rationalise so much that was pure denial and front and my mask, and to have the power to do that taken away, really, the only option was to kind of be a bit more honest, which is great.
Yeah. And then working with an artist who's part of the tribe, i.e. somebody in recovery, a recoverist, made people feel safe and understood and able to take more risks in what they reached for, and and in what they gained from making the artwork. Working with Christina with a tested methodology, someone who's very skilled in unwrapping people, help participants to experiment photographically and emotionally. The project left people feeling normal and grown up rather than ghettoized and infantilized, which is a familiar and uncomfortable state. And reframing recovery as utopian rather than through medical or criminological discourses, which are very prevalent still, resonated with the possibility that people's difficult experiences could be experienced and turned into a social asset rather than a deficit. Working with visual media allowed participants to connect to feelings and to make something of those feelings and to reevaluate them. And working in a group that built trust by sharing visual images allowed people from different backgrounds and communities to connect and recognize their differences and the things that they shared. So not to obliterate difference, but to have that sense of a kind of, difference as a benefit, I suppose, but also with sharing. So there are implications for this to do with allowing felt knowledge its proper space alongside science-based models. So felt knowledge is part of artistic practice in this case. And, artistic research is currently debating its place in its public value and its place within the academy. And I think that one of the things that came through very strongly for me was that we need a research language that is able to talk about these different, sort of different and new language to talk about felt knowledge, different from scientific knowledge. So what you get in academia quite often with artistic research is it's absorbed into and asked to use scientific language. We need to develop our own language. And it's hard, and it's hard to write about this stuff because the gestures, the felt things, the senses, the movements, how do you start to explicate those, which is what you're asked to do as a researcher. So we tend to want to go, well, look at the film, it's in the film, look at it. But of course, it's in there, but it does need to be teased out quite often. We need to understand it in different ways. So I suppose the question and the thing that we're, continuing to try to do is to develop language and concepts that are legible to those who aren't working within the arts, but without losing what's specific and powerful to the arts.
Fantastic. And can we talk about now what did Wonderland do to the public? Now, so the public feedback.
Are you asking me?
Well, I'm asking anyone who wants to. Because
it made them cry. Seriously, because the film won an Arts Humanities Research Council Research in Film Awards for under the Utopian category for reimagining the future, and we went to London to BAFTA, Michaela, Amanda, myself, and as we walked in and people knew we were Wonderland, they all kept rushing up to us saying, "We loved your film, it made us cry," But they didn't mean kind of cry with pity. They meant cry with kind of real feeling and emotion and empathy and care, and of course, the film won an award. So, I remember I showed within another project, I showed the film to a group of participants, and there was one particular participant, a young black woman, and the film finished and she burst into tears. And she went, finally, I found where I belong. And, the language of the film, or in particular, how people were differently talking around their experiences, their recovery through a cultural language, through this different alignment, made sense to her, you know. And in terms of her, where she was at, it kind of, it opened the door. And she said it was a transformational moment. So there's a real power there is a real power within the film that actually it's difficult for us to see being in it in a way. Mm-hmm. We don't have that distance, you know. It's just us. It's our group. We're used to each other's voices and words, but I think externally, I also there's a very leading recovery activist in the US called William White. He does something called the William White Papers, and he's very eminent, very well respected. And I sent him a link to the film, and his comment back was, "I've never seen or heard anything like it." You know, so he thought it was that progressive, you know, and of course, you know, it's a collective experience, but I also credit Amanda and Huw in terms of their filmmaking abilities and how kind of they approached, you know, this kind of devotion. They approached with love, with care, which is all actually that we ask for from the world, from society, is to see us as people. You know, addiction is but a response to living. It isn't a choice. We aren't moral failings. It's just a form of, illness, condition, whatever you want to call it, you know. And so I think that's what it offers up as well, an insight into our lives, into a very much misunderstood condition, which is rejected by society because ultimately they see themselves within it and they don't want to. You know, addiction is so pervasive, and substance is so pervasive. You're only one arm's length away, you know, from where we were. But society wants to push us, wants to hyper marginalize us because it's so dark, it's so painful, it's so destructive. So many people die, you know. But not all of us, you know. Some of us are still here to tell the tale, you know, survival. And you know, I choose a cultural platform, a cultural lens through which to understand what happened to me. And when I trusted in that, things changed for me, you know. But many see this approach or looking at your recovery this way almost kind of it's what's the word when it's something really anti-religious? I always forget my words when I need them.
Anti-religious.
Atheist?
Sorry?
Atheist?
No, worse than that. They'd burn you for it.
Heretic.
Heretical.
Yeah.
You know, that art is seen as somehow diversionary and not, you know, not a valid process within itself.
Yeah.
You know, but work like this can sit aside, can complement. You know, I think we need all the tools we can. But also, you know, it's not just about recovery, it's about the artist as well. You know, it's about commissioning when you work, it's about artist development, about exploring social practice, forms of authorship, you know, representation. How do we represent, you know, marginalized groups, which are kind of not I'm losing my words again. It's too late in the evening. Which are not sensationalizing
Mhm.
or
Mark,
exploiting.
sorry, do you have Facebook on somewhere, even on the phone? No?
No
Okay.
longer.
Okay.
And so it's, you know, this type of work is about many things. It's also about internationalism. It's about building community. It's about using cultural and individuals' cultural assets as kind of social reintegration to open up a new pathway. And, you know, it's about taking the blinkers off. It's about looking outside of the ghetto.
Picking up on what you say, I mean, so many things that you see are framed with classic sort of stereotypical roles of saviour, sufferer, you know, all those sort of things, and that is gone from this. The filmmaker, the artist, the participants are all equal, and the process is everybody has a role in that process, but everybody's equal. And everybody's taking risks. They're taking personal risks, the kind of things somebody might do in a very intimate, confidential meeting, whether it be a 12-step fellowship or in a service or things like that. But we were all taking chances, and it was going out there. It was very visible recovery. And I think in some ways that allows people instantly to start connecting with the film, because they're not at risk, because they're not threatened by us taking a chance. And I think that's sort of a really important role as part of the visible recovery movement. So it wasn't that long ago that the majority of people found it really uncomfortable to talk about cancer. And I can remember people avoiding people with cancer as if they could catch it from them or something. And really a lot of the fear and a lot of the revulsion and the rejection of people who experience addiction is really all about the other person fearing the potential for their experience. And when I picked up a pint of Timmy Taylor's Landlord, other brands are available, and I enjoyed having a healthy pint with friends in the pub, I didn't plan on being addicted to alcohol. And I think that's the key. Nobody plans to be an addict. Nobody chooses to become enslaved by a substance. And actually, it's not the substance that's the issue anyway. It's us. And it's us not knowing how to live or running away from living. And so another bit of the transformation for us in the process is that, again, we're being visible, we're fronting out anything that has ever scared us, really, and putting it there, and in butt naked in some ways, and owning everything we are, and embracing everything we are, and embracing everything each other is. And wouldn't it be fantastic? I mean, we're the thing we talked about language. We've got a climate at the moment where we've got young people who are really overly concerned with image, and a very produced image of themselves, and are frightened to be seen when they don't live up to the produced image. And I mean, of course, teens are always concerned and self-conscious because they're going through a radical change and trying to see who they are in the world. So there's a bit of that will always be there. But I think there's a real pressure on young people. And equally, at the same time, we've got an awful lot going on, both in academic institutions, in the media, in social media, everything, of language and how we use language to compel other people to define us a certain way. And actually, the only people who really need to define us is us. And speaking our truth is a real freedom. And I love anybody who speaks their truth, but I don't always have to believe their truth. I just have to accept it's their truth. And we're living in a climate where that's becoming less and less possible now. And so I would love to see a bit more stripping away of language and a bit more loving integrity from a lot of our practice.
Now, there was Gemma Meek who wrote this bit, which is in the online exhibition of the Wonderland project, which is very interesting. So it's like to also add to answering the question I just made about the public's response. She looked at the Wonderland books and she wrote, the Wonderland artist books, through this perspective, demand the reader to question what it means to feel in all its pain and hardship, through images of bruised bodies, hospital beds, moments with loved ones, barren landscapes, and potentially painful memories. As a reader, I feel provoked to consider what it might be like to turn the lens on myself, on my own image, and to question how I might be seen by others. Perhaps my initial reaction of discomfort is because of my own fear at the thought of baring my own skin, memories, and experiences to share what I consider my humanity. It's beautiful, huh? Anyone wants to add anything about the public? Or shall we perhaps talk about other, after Wonderland, what have you done? What other projects have you done? And so the Wonderland legacy, who wants to?
Well, myself and Amanda went on, or I commissioned Amanda and Huw Wahl to make another film, which is called My Recoverist Family, which was looking at journeys of LGBT plus recovery, because I had a specific interest in how you kind of break down the recovery community into recovery community subgroups, and how there's a need for culturally competent approaches for each of those communities. The one shoe fits all approach doesn't work. So so that was something that came out of it for me. And I also kind of developed my own artist project, which is Photoloo, which kind of borrows, in a way, loosely borrows from Christina's methodology. Loosely, I said, Christina. And it essentially is around photographing our shit, you know. And Photoloo came about because at Somerset House in London, we had to deliver something for Wonderland. We wanted to take people through a similar experience. So we created a temporary photographic studio, which was Amanda's tent that she took camping, which was to cover the toilet, you know. And then we put in there a chair, and we had a Polaroid camera, and we had instructions provided by Christina. So people could take their own self-portrait and experience something of what we went through. It was us trying to share. And anyway, so this title Photoloo came, and Amanda eventually presented me with the said tent. And it's kind of, and it's in its very embryonic state, but it's a project I've presented twice now.
I do feel we need to make it clear that when you say you're photographing your shit, that is not literal.
What I mean is kind of not your literal excrement, no, more your emotional excrement, the stuff that goes on in our heads, the critical voice, the trauma, the conflict. And there's a way of kind of through an assisted self-portrait or taking a Polaroid can somehow get you to connect with that and just express something through your face. And kind of, yeah, anyway. Michaela wants to come in, so I will.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, Jane and Amanda can join in on this as well. I mean, we went on pretty quickly afterwards, didn't we, to go on and do a sort of definitely a follow-on project, which was it for Knowing from the Inside, Amanda?
Knowing from the Inside, yeah.
Yeah, Knowing from the Inside, which sort of picked up on all those themes. And I think basically what we decided to do was, as I've sort of mentioned earlier, was really take that sort of idea to the max. And we ended up, it was a female only, so unfortunately Mark had the wrong bits for this particular project, otherwise he could have joined in. So we basically ended up in a studio naked, all of us, projecting images. So first was projecting images onto our skin of the sort of negative and stigmatizing things. So that was the idea of, almost going back to Jane's idea of the skin, things are projected onto us as addicts or people in recovery. They're not us, but they're projected onto our skin, and if we're not careful, they become us. And the flip side of that is then we put our own images, which were almost the opposite, which were very loving and wonderful and flowery and all this sort of stuff. And then we went on, Amanda and I went up to Aberdeen, and we went to do that with a mixed group of people from all over the world, really. And the one thing that struck me, that there was a woman there, and she was from was it Canadian, very North Canadian, native Canadian tribe. And at first she was like really, really horrified with the concept of us having our kit off, and we told her she didn't have to look, didn't we, really? But she actually loved the idea of images on the skin, because in her culture that had been lost. You know, she was going to go back and work with women and young girls to paint images on their skin, to have that idea of empowerment and all that sort of stuff. So that was pretty amazing, that sort of stripping things down to the core and then putting things onto it to do your identity. But you almost need to strip down first before you do that. And I suppose I'm not saying that rock bottom is the way that you should do recovery, because I don't think anyone should reach rock bottom, but it strikes me that's a similar process of recovery, is you sort of you need to strip yourself down to redeem yourself and actually forget the images that are projected on you and create your own images. That was quite deep for a Tuesday night. I shall stop now. But I do think you've got to tell the funny story, Amanda, because that was also one of the best points of my life.
Okay, well, so I'd booked a studio at work so that we could do this work, or so that, as I thought, the women other than myself could do this work in the photographic studio, do something. I knew they wanted to, photograph themselves naked and together, but I sort of thought I was the facilitator. So anyway, I remember being in the doorway of the art school and everybody turning up with, not just how many of us were there? Were there 5 of you plus me? 4 or 5, but with all these kind of trolleys full of, I don't know, like bits of willow and withies and paints, and I mean just like tons of 3 trolley loads of stuff. So off we went to the photographic studio, and I got the key and everything, and we went in and and set up, and then everyone took their clothes off apart from me, and Michaela or somebody said, or everybody said, come on, you're not in here with us unless you're doing the same as us. And the whole sort of tables were reversed. I mean, they already had been, but it was the sort of final moment of me accepting that I'm in early recovery, because I grew up in a family with alcoholism, so I knew a little bit about it, but I always thought it was it was my dad's problem, it was someone else's problem. I hadn't really absorbed the fact that I was just as much, had all the same kind of behaviors, if you like, as someone who has an addiction. It's just, you know, it's like being a dry drunk or whatever. And yeah, so there we were, all stripped off. I'm in my workplace. There's paints and there's, you know, people, we're painting on each other's bodies and stuff. And then the time's ticking away. And, you know, I'd forgotten that the technicians go home at 4 o'clock or whatever. And there's this banging on the door, bang, 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 bang. When are you out of there? I was like, get clothes back on, tidy up. You know, in this studio, you're not supposed to have anything. No, none of the equipment that we had, nothing is allowed in there. It's like this very, very clean space. It was, my heart was something like this. I was kind of bright red in the face. We managed to pack everything away, get our clothes on, cover up the paint or whatever. And yeah, I think he came and banged about 3 times on the door. And I was, yeah, I mean, it was...
It was like, you know, those images. Sorry.
It's like when you're having an affair, isn't it? It's like that for you. Yeah. You're having an affair and your husband comes home and everyone's scrabbling around trying to find their television. That was great. That felt really good.
It felt great because we'd broken loads of rules and locked ourselves in.
And also,
so we had the power.
Yeah. And you've taken the researcher and, you know, because I did have a lot of hair. I was inviting you into the art school. We didn't know each other so well then. All of those things were just completely, transformed in a brilliant way. And what I wanted to say was, you know, in terms of things that I've gone on to do, Mark's talked about that. And yes, there's various projects, but the thing is that it really, really changed. It changed who I am at work. It changed who I am in lots of ways, but I really notice it at work because I have been able to speak out about things that I don't necessarily agree with, say at work, but in a kind of, you know, using nonviolent communication techniques, but I have been able to find my voice at work in a way that I never had before. And when I didn't have it, you know, when your voice isn't able to really come out of you, you feel, how do you feel? I mean, you feel oppressed, you feel miserable, you feel depressed, you feel a whole number of things because you're not really owning or able to say what you really believe and think and care about and what you love and what you love less, what you need to change and how you want it to change. So, yeah, it was sort of a very, very transformative experience for me.
Fantastic. Yeah, so then, you know, there will be other projects for sure. Huh? What if we now talk about something, I mean, hoping that perhaps if someone wants to make any question, they can do so and we can answer. And but I was thinking if we can expand more in what I was saying at the beginning, which is something that was in the Recoverist Manifesto. No? The Recoverist Manifesto was done by Clive Parkinson. Do you want to explain a little bit about the Recoverist Manifesto, and then I'll continue with what I wanted to say. Mark?
Another collaborator of mine at the Manchester School of Art at Manchester Metropolitan University is Dr. Clive Parkinson, who's the director of Arts for Health. And Arts for Health originated in Manchester over 50 years ago, and he looks at the therapeutic value of art making. And Clive was a partner in a UK project of mine that I first worked with Christina called I Am Memoirs of Addiction Recovery, and the manifesto was developed out of that. So if you like, it's a pan-European manifesto, and it's the direct voice of those in recovery, and the first document of its type that I know. Through a series of consultations and a series of provocations, we gathered the responses. And Clive, who's he's very eminent and very articulate, crafted and shaped and constructed this thing which became the manifesto. And that's available online. It's available in Italian. So it's not an English document, it's not a UK document, it's a pan-European document. And I think that's critically important. It introduced into Europe concepts of recovery outside of the pathologized or the medicalized, you know, and it introduced into Europe the concept of recovery and recovery movements as a social movement, you know, and Will Self, who's a famous English author, wrote the introduction, and one of the powerful things he says to in it that recovery or recoverism is about the right to feel and to be felt by other feeling people. And so Clive's document put flesh on the bones, really. It started to beef and flesh out the ideology and philosophy of recovery, of recoverism, what it is, because, you know, it's something that's out there in the world for people to add to, shape. It's not owned by anyone, you know, it's collective, so it's emerging. But I also think it's around collectivity, and it's around identification, and identification through the consequential pain of living, that we're all in recovery from something, be that the death of a loved one, a broken leg, addiction. So, you know, and that addiction is but a response to trauma. And so for me, what that does is it draws the subject of addiction and the people suffering from it in from the margins and frames it as a health concern, a health issue. So that's where the identification. So recoverism is for everybody. It's not just for us. It's a collective approach, a collective stance. So actually, in this world of Brexit, which is an isolationist stance, I believe recoverism is the answer, because it's about collectivity. It's around respect. It's around empathy, care, love, valuing each other, doing things together. You know, the power in the power in the collective. And of course, Manchester is the birthplace of many social movements. So it's actually quite fitting that it's born out of the northwest of England.
Now, can you answer this question? Are you planning on bringing the idea to other places in the UK?
Well, in terms of my work, we work locally, you know, not locally, regionally, nationally, internationally. I mean, at the moment, in terms of portraits of recovery, we're in the process of a new project called KISS, but it's around developing the organisation itself, its infrastructure, developing a 5-year business plan, bringing in a small staff team. So we're kind of inward focused at the moment in terms of public delivery. But yeah, there are plans afoot, and you know, yeah, I speak at conferences across the UK, work shown in exhibitions in London, and so forth. So I guess watch this space and follow the Facebook page for news.
Yeah. We're putting several links. Now, I wanted to go on what I was going to say. No, go on, Michaela.
I just wanted to say to Anna, because I know, Anna, that Mark and I are going to be talking about some work that we can do with the SRC as well. So there will be something in Scotland.
In Scotland.
Yeah. As part of this project called KISS, which is an acronym for Keep It Simple, Stupid, which is a recovery acronym. Part of that strand of work, he's looking at developing a series of cultural partnerships, again nationally, and one of them will be with the Scottish Recovery Consortium and Action on Addiction. So it's not just with arts organisations, and that's looking at kind of how we can start to come together and have more of an impact, a greater voice, and hopefully have an impact on the sector, I guess, or thinking, or removing the blinkers, or offering up a different way, which is of equal value, and has transformation and has long-lasting impact.
Do you want to add something, Michaela, about this, about the UK? No? Okay.
I mean, I think just one important thing to say, that the UK has a flourishing recovery community and movement, but what's really, in terms of compared to the United States and Australia, which have, you know, strong movements themselves, what's unique about the UK is this cultural arm that's starting to develop. We're a visual arts organisation. Then there's another company called Fallen Angels, which looks at recovery through contemporary dance. And then there's Outside Edge Theatre Company, which is looking at recovery through theatre techniques and processes. So there's this emergent strand of work which is creating a kind of unique identity. And I mean, I've had people contact me from the States that's looking at the UK, and because of this innovation.
Yeah. Okay, well, what I was going to say about the Recoveries Manifesto is that in the Recoveries Manifesto, there's this concept that we recoverists, because we are sort of experts, I mean, I'm putting it on my own words, forgive my English, that we recovers because we are experts in reconstructing our identity out of stigma and a more pro-social identity. We can inspire others to do likewise, but also we can, it says in the manifesto, we can educate those who stigmatize us. Yeah. And I was wondering, like my question to you all, to whoever wants to respond, is precisely in these times of the health crisis and the pandemic, in which perhaps society needs to recover, perhaps society needs to change, to reconstruct its identity in a perhaps more empathic way. How can we, as recoverists, yeah, I won't even finish the sentence. Go ahead, Jane.
Well, there's an interesting parallel that I've been doing some things with Church Action on poverty, because I'm really interested in the causes of poverty, and that, you know, in a rich country like ours, having people who live in poverty is a political decision. And these people are not other. They are people who have been disadvantaged purposefully by a system that does not serve them. So I'm quite strident about that. But one of the lovely things that's come out of some of the things we've now done on Zoom, and obviously there are some people who are digitally excluded, but we've found there's been a huge sort of democratization, a huge equaling of people being seen in their domestic setting, maybe without makeup on, whereas maybe you've always seen them with makeup on, maybe with the cat walking across the screen in front of them, the dog on the lap, Mark. And some of that, people are open to receiving that change in perception and structure. So it's a really lovely timing for us to be having this conversation, because actually the project is doing that, and it's taking the power up again, and it's being owned by the people who experience things. The WEA, the Workers' Educational Association, was always set up with a great ethos to deliver education to people who hadn't normally had access. It was really the birth of the night class for people who were working in factories or down pits and things like that. And they've discovered something they didn't expect to discover during this period of coronavirus, which is that the using of Zoom has allowed people to access things outside their geographical boundaries and has generated an absolute buzz of excitement and joy. And so when things go back to whatever normal is, and I hope building back better really is better, not a superficial front, but the WEA is going to retain some of its classes on Zoom, and they have realised that actually gives greater access to people with disability, mobility issues, things like that. It won't suit everybody, but they're adding that string. And so our tutors are there with their children in the background, with the cat on the keyboard and things like that. And there's something very rich that has come out of all this. Obviously, I don't want to take anything away from the tragedy and the suffering that people have experienced. But for the majority of people, we've had opportunities placed in front of us that are new and exciting as well. And that's maybe it's that sort of trickle down and slow osmosis of change. We don't educate by standing in a hall and giving a lecture to people and saying this is what addiction is. The education is by exposure. Does that make sense?
Great. Thanks. Michaela?
Yeah, I suppose to build on that, I mean, what fascinated me at the beginning of COVID was how basically all the services pretty much shut down. So you went from, everything to doors closed fundamentally. And what happened was the community stepped in. Now, the community has always been there, but it just wasn't allowed to step in. So say in Scotland, you couldn't go to your local drug and alcohol service, but the recovery community was online like that. We released a lot of funding so that people could get data and stuff. And what we've ended up with the digitally excluded community now being digitally included. We've had people getting recovery online, which is absolutely amazing. And like you said, it's democratized the process. And I think if anybody should learn anything from COVID is that our systems are very creaky and cannot cope with anything. And their response to a crisis is to shut their doors. Whereas the community response is to open their doors and find creative ways to get around issues while keeping people safe. So, it's creativity. Our systems lack creativity. Our communities are full of it. We just need to release that.
They're constipated, let's be honest. I mean, I always use the example of in my local service, if I put a lanyard on, I can do a lot of things. But without a lanyard with my identity, I am not trusted to boil a kettle. And the culture we live in our big services is risk averse. And what we did in this project is the exact opposite. And it is totally attractive and seductive to me because of that. And although I have a lot to be grateful to my local service for, and a lot of the people working in the services are in recovery themselves, filled with empathy and love and a real desire to do things right. But the structures and the funding path and the power to control the funding is always following a political agenda. And as Michaela said earlier, the criminology-based thing. I mean, we actually had a service called Crime Reduction Initiatives. That's where people used to go for their drug and alcohol treatment. Crikey, how demeaning and degrading is that? So that, we welcome you in here for a bit of our care because it's reducing the crime figures. We don't actually care about your suffering. Thankfully, we've outgrown that, and hopefully we can outgrow the sort of constipation of the slow, laborious systems of these huge organizations, and oh, that's got to go to board. And I think, well, I could do that in 30 seconds. What is the problem? What is the problem? And they can't tell you. It's just not the system.
I mean, I think
We need to break more rules.
Jane touched on some important issues there, because people say to me, what is Portraits of Recovery? And I say, well, it's a contemporary arts organisation whose work looks at the intersectionality of art and addiction. We're not a service. We don't offer treatment. We don't fit within that context. If anything, we kind of sit between the world of art and the world of addiction recovery. And actually, people look at us suspiciously from both sides. And last year I met with the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and he said, I don't really understand what you do. And now I see that as a compliment, because it speaks to the innovation. Because what our work does is deliver on a variety of different levels. It essentially looks at recovery as a cultural and social process. It sits outside of the treatment process, you know, and that's what recovery is. It's cultural, it's social, it's political, it's around living life on life's terms. You know, it's like it's kind of, we're people, we're not patients, you know. We're not there to be treated. We're there to live, to try to live differently, and kind of, and art can and does open a different kind of gateway, but people are suspicious of that. And also people are suspicious that it's led by, for and on behalf of the community. It's being delivered by the community itself, for itself, you know, because we are not to be trusted, even when we are well, because essentially we are a moral failing. That's how deeply stigmatized this subject and people are. The ecology is not there. The infrastructure is not there. If you look at the homelessness sector and the range of kind of, you know, third sector organizations delivering different things, it doesn't exist within the recovery community. And why is that? Why are we we're not even marginalized? Because to be marginalized, you already have visibility. We're hyper marginalized. We're pushed right to the edges, you know, and the investment isn't there. And actually, we're the best people to know what we need.
Yeah.
You know, whereas actually,
well, I'm going to be...
actually it's very top down, that we,
yeah.
you know, that other people know best, because we're not to be trusted. And when we are well, we are to be feared, because, you know, I can't kind of put it into words, but it's kind of, if we were that crazy on alcohol, how crazy can we be just on life? You know?
Oh, it's because we change so much, and I think that people fear that change, you know. So if we became, you know, pro-social and have a different identity, then they could go to the other extreme.
I mean, I think it's also because we threaten the status quo.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when the recovery agenda first started becoming popular with Public Health England and and before Public Health England, it was the local regional commissioners who've all become Public Health England now. But there was money out there for the community. It wasn't enough to really support a lot of the things that the community wanted to do. But there was some money there, and it was used really creatively and passionately, and lots of really fab things happened. I mean, Michaela and Mark and I were all around when like the recovery walk came to Manchester, Greater Manchester, and that was a fabulous period of time, and Greater Manchester Recovery Federation was great and really dynamic and vital. And what happened is when the austerity agenda came in, there was a contraction of money available, full stop. And so all the services reframed themselves as providing recovery and snaffled the money from the community. I'm going to be completely honest about it. They are extremely good at talking to people and teasing out people's own goals, the motivational interviewing, being there, teaching you lots of techniques and things like that, and getting you clean or sober or whatever term you like to use. They're very good at supporting you to function and deal with those very early stages, but they are absolutely bobbins, as a general rule, at appreciating the vitality and the potential of the people they have. And they do see them as patients, and they do feel threatened. I've sat in there and I've done stuff off my own bat for ages, and they really don't know what to do with you. They kind of know they shouldn't really have a problem, but they don't know what to do. They're completely baffled. They really can't cope with things that don't fit within that structure. And so this is so fabulous because it shows a very different view to people. So somebody coming into recovery or considering recovery who watches that film will feel their own potential, hopefully, and their own hope, rather than how it's defined by another structure that tells them they can't even be trusted to boil a kettle.
I think you're right in what you say. It redefines what recovery is and can be.
Yeah,
you know.
And it's a mirroring process, no? Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
I guess the other bit that I wanted to say in terms of recoverism, what that actually does is it's a reframing of recovering people and community as social assets that society can learn from for new strategies of responsible living, free from substance and self-harming and defeating behaviors. You know, it's like many people, for instance, you know, how do you get from 2 epileptic seizures in a day on a hospital trolley from alcohol withdrawal to sit here speaking as I am now? You know, there's a distance traveled in that. So actually, we have lots to offer society in terms of how to live life on life's terms. You know, so so rather than, you know, a deficit-based community, to see us as an asset-based community. So for me, recoverism embodies that as well. So in terms of talking about where we are at now, you know, on the eve of no trade deal with the EU and you know, Brexit and all of that, you know, that's why I think the lens of recoverism is really, really interesting, because I think it speaks to that agenda, because, you know, the UK has committed a massive act of self-harm and will need to first go through acceptance and then a long period of recovery.
And a long period of mourning as well, because I've been mourning since 2016 and I'm dreading.
I'm quite accepting of it now, you know, it's done.
Yeah, I know it's happened, but feeling the loss. And I mean, I have a mother who lives in Spain, and thankfully I am able to get an Irish passport, so going through that process now. So I will also have a European passport as well as a UK isolationist passport, which pleases me. But I mean, I totally agree with you. I look at the self-harm that comes from lack of loving ourselves, which often is to do with the way structures treat us. And obesity is another one. I'm the person in this group who became obese, and I'm no longer clinically obese. And I'm going through a fairly similar parallel process in terms of learning to love my body with how I feed myself. And this is where we, understanding our own addiction and our own recovery and our own trauma, we are that asset in everything. Every one of these behaviors that we as human beings do, we might spend too much, we might party too hard, we might over exercise, we might diet too much, we might, all the things that hurt us, they all happen for a reason. And it's about exploring those reasons, forgiving yourself for everything, learning to love yourself and know yourself a little bit, and growth and transformation. Einstein said, didn't he, famously, I don't know if it's a misquote, but you always see it on these little posters, life is like a bicycle. To keep you balanced, you have to keep moving. And I do think that we have lots of constructed goals out in society, and actually all we have to do is keep moving and slowly, gently transforming and changing ourselves, and that is our way forward as human beings.
Great. Amanda, Michaela, do you want to add something to this, or shall I make a new question? I mean, we have now 15 minutes and we don't have really more questions apart from, well, Judy Weiser just said, I am very impressed at the depth, thoroughness and sensitivity of this project, and I'm excitedly looking forward to viewing the film. Congratulations to you all. I mean, this is quite long, but you can see it here. So we don't have much questions. So can I ask a question to you all? Do you think? Well, yeah, go on.
Well, I just wanted to ask Manda if she was willing to, or wanted to share a little bit more about the impact that being involved in the project had on kind of academia.
Yeah, great.
In particular, the title of your presentation at the British Library. Well, not title of it, but your opening words.
Did I say I'm a recovering academic?
Yes.
Ah, fantastic.
And it shocks the room.
Wow.
Yeah, I was trying to share the photographs of us earlier, the ones in the naked ones, and I tried to share.
No, but I mean, I have the book open in my computer, but we are broadcasting. No, the problem is that if we really want this video to be seen, YouTube would delete the video and Facebook as well. So I think that we cannot do that. But I mean, I think that you've talked about that, and it was fantastic what you said. But go on, just.
Well, because on my back in that photograph is written the words "recovering academic," and gosh, it's difficult. I mean, it's almost easier if someone like Mark or Michaela made an observation about it, because it's hard for me to observe from sort of within. And I guess I've already said that I sort of found my voice, but yeah, maybe you can say something,
well,
Mark. I'm not sure what else to say.
What you were saying was that you decided to bring your whole self to the work, and not the self that had to leave your emotions and feelings outside the room, that you could bring an emotive lens to what you did, rather than this I can't think of the words, rather than this kind of non-emotive. You describe it in a different way, this critical, clinical kind of factual self, this almost more of a reductive, the book on the shelf with the dust on it, kind of, you wanted to dust the shelves and put back in some sunshine.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me, yeah, okay, so, and I've written about this a bit in different places, that I think I realized during the project something that, these things are bubbling up, but then something like this project comes along and it really crystallizes things, and it's a kind of another, suddenly you're lifted up into another kind of crystallization and understanding of things, that I used intellectual language to hide feelings, to push feelings away, to not have to feel stuff. So there's, a way in which, and I think a lot of academics are involved in the same game, really, which is, there's even a profile for a typical PhD student that kind of involves, someone who's really quite obsessive, neurotic, trying to control things, pin things down. And, a lot of that is about having feelings that are unbearable and being stuck and not knowing what to do with that stuff, and just, finding it hard to let people in, all of those things. So yes, it's about becoming more complete, being able to show more sides of yourself. So you've got much more to play, so in a meeting, you might be able to be, quite incisive and so-called objective or analytical at certain points, but then you might also be able to be picking up the feeling tone and be speaking to those feelings at the same time, or kind of exposing your vulnerability at the same time. And an example is that the other day I gave a little short talk as part of a bigger thing. It was a workshop for women who want to progress to be readers and professors. And I had given that talk in 2017. I'd given a talk, and I'd found it so exposing, so painful to sort of say what I needed to say, that I just didn't. I said no to it. And then this year I said yes again. And I managed to say what I wanted to say in a much more coherent way and to bring all of myself in. But I still had a reaction afterwards. So, and people were very, very sort of generous in their response to it, and were kind of saying, thank you for, sharing your vulnerability and stuff. But I still had a reaction after. I didn't sleep all that night, and I knew I wouldn't. And I'm just more used to that now, because it really, it just opened up a lot of things, but I kind of knew how to manage it. I made space before, I made space afterwards. So it's not that it just all resolves, but the whole experience was much more positive for me. And I could do it again without so much reservation this time. So it's that thing about getting back on your bicycle when you've fallen off. I think, keep moving again. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you experience this, but you don't just recover and suddenly you're okay. You've still got all this stuff going on, right? But you're handling it a little bit differently.
Life has all the ups and downs. I mean, in the middle of this project, my dad died, and part of the process of recovery, we'd had a very volatile relationship, and there'd been violence in our past, and I'd been very angry about some of the things that happened when I was growing up, and I'd started learning to forgive myself and then forgive my parents and then forgive me a bit more, and it sort of went like that. And so by the time my dad died, he was unwell for a little while, and it was actually rather beautiful in a way. I couldn't change the suffering, but what I could do is appreciate that this unwell part of my dad was a part of my dad who could receive love and care that he'd never allowed me to see before. So it was a very, very precious time. Now, other people who live in the public face world were all going, oh, that wasn't the Jeff we know. And I got quite irritated, because for me, he was completed for me. And it was a very peaceful, it was still a bereavement, still a huge loss. And when I crumpled slightly, within a week, I was back with you guys. And when I crumpled slightly on the morning of the Thursday after my dad had died, Christina went, oh, wait, and got a camera and was photographing the tears and things. And in fact, my little book had an image of his chair the night after he died, the chair he'd sat in, and an image of his sandals, and actually a very small image that I took of him after he died, and things like that. And this helped me with my grieving process. It was massive. It was massive to me, and the way I thought about the grief and the way I thought about that process was massive. And I know that Christina had shared about her relationship with her mum and things, and you know, when her mum wasn't well and was frail, and that really helped me. And the power of vulnerability, it's incredible, because vulnerability can be power. It sort of seems an oxymoron, but it is powerful and rather beautiful.
And it's about, well, for me, it's about censoring myself less. So, you know, I get nervous about public speaking, and it's to do with censoring and being worried about what my appearance is, saying the wrong thing, you know, being shamed, making a mistake, all those kinds of things. So, you know, becoming less censoring of self, I suppose, is what we're talking about as well.
I've just kind of remembered another thing that came out of the project, and that was kind of a shared presentation that myself and Amanda and Michaela put together, which was called Guilt and Shame, Academics, Smackheads, Crackheads and Drunks. You know, we kind of sees that. I mean, for me, guilt and shame, I mean, I'm a recovering Catholic as well as an alcoholic. So, I mean, I'm riddled with guilt and shame, you know, and that's what I'm recovering from now, is guilt and shame. And, you know, I'm a gay man as well, you know, so it's I've got much to feel apparently shameful and guilty about, you know, in many ways. And we well, Amanda and I, Michaela wasn't well, shared that presentation at the European World Health Congress in that was held in Manchester a couple of years ago. No, was it this year, Amanda? No, it was last year.
No, it was either the end of 2018 or 2019. Yeah, it's a while ago.
I mean, these things, you know, it's all about kind of, you know, the project created, like Amanda talked about, a liminal space in which trust was built, and that trust still exists today, and it continues. And I think most of all, it's a project that I look back on with fondness and warmth. I felt safe within it, and we challenged ourselves and we took risks. And Christina's methodology allowed us to do that, because it is challenging. As Christina is challenging as an artist and as a friend. I know. And so friendships blossom. So it's difficult. This project is complex, and you know, in terms of a project brief, what we set out to do, we achieved much more. But I think most of all, we had fun. You know, the conversations we had down that table, we just laughed. And if anyone else was looking in terms of what we were laughing at, they'd have thought, you know, they were kind of, I don't know, they were in the asylum, you know. And
oh, sorry.
And there was equity. We were equal. You know, and that's also part of what the project was looking at in terms of the artist's role and the participants' role, and where we come, you know, where it was co-authored, when we stepped into the artist space, when we authored our own works like the artist books, you know. And I'd also urge people to look at the artist books, because they're incredible, you know, piece of work in themselves.
Look at that.
Piece of work in themselves. And the cubes, I have one in my
cubes.
I have my cube in the.
Oh, there's something been lovely to watch.
Yeah, because I mean, the other thing we worked with, of course, was our family albums.
Thank you for your realness. Yeah, yeah.
Didn't we, Christina? We worked with our family albums.
Yeah.
And you know, and my whole book was about kind of establishing or re-establishing a relationship with my father, who died when I was 3.5, and it was called Dear Dad. And actually, that's still a very current line of inquiry for me. Is kind of what is my masculine identity? Because I was raised by a very powerful and in some ways controlling woman, who, you know, a diva. That's we talk about Christina.
yeah.
And you know, it's kind of, I was never sure of my masculine side, or what it means to be a man and queer, you know. And so there's been many offshoots, I think, and still continues to be, and will be, you know. And that's what I find really interesting about the work I do, is it kind of how it gives space to many forms of inception.
And do you think that this thing of coming out as addicts, like telling our own story to the public, or coming out as our vulnerability, you know, like Amanda was saying, or like Jane was saying, like showing this vulnerability and coming out, and actually becoming a speaker for other recoverists, this is probably something that allows us to not only to empower ourselves, and that people who perhaps are sort of scared sometimes, you know, because of this speaking out, and because this thing that we're saying something so difficult and intimate, it's sort of, you know, between human beings we mirror each other, and therefore it's like, so if this person is disclosing that, you know, and you know, it's like they should do likewise, you know, or are we inviting people to do likewise, you know, to disclose their emotions or their difficult stuff, their what we call shit, you know.
I think maybe what the work's doing is inviting people to be the change they want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think that, for example, the responsibility of addiction, the fact that we were responsible, as opposed to, for example, in mental health, you get a diagnosis and it's like you're not responsible for that. What do you think is the difference? Like, because of this responsibility has certainly worsened our stigma, because it was like our fault, right? But has this been in some ways beneficial to your recovery? Because for me, it has. Michaela?
Well, I mean, for me, it's never been about fault. I mean, for me, addiction is a logical response to all the shit in the world, and you know, I'm comfortable with that. I made at those times the best decisions that I could make. They weren't good decisions, they weren't bad decisions. It was the only way that I could stay alive. In the end, the solution became the problem and overtook. It stopped being a solution. But you know, a question about mental health. I mean, for me, the fact that most people are suffering, an increasing proportion of people are suffering from mental health issues, is because we've created a toxic environment. You can't expect people to be well and healthy if the soil is shit. And fundamentally, we've created a culture, a society. We've ripped up our communities, and then we wonder why people are unwell. And it's the same for obesity. It's the same for heart disease. It's the same for smoking. People don't do these things because they're weak. They do these things to cope in a world that really doesn't suit us. And what I've learned in recovery is, in very small liminal spaces, we can create worlds where we belong. And then we don't do that shit. Then we do all the good stuff. But there aren't those many spaces, and that's what, project showed me those spaces are possible.
Great.
So I don't feel, I now feel. I work a lot on my guilt and shame as well, Mark, but my guilt and shame is much more about, why didn't I understand this before? Why hadn't I learned these things before? It's not about what I did. It's much more about why I hadn't been more open to other things. Than maybe. So, yeah, to go back to that, safe spaces is what we're talking about. Spaces where we can be who we are, because, quite fundamentally, I love all of you lot, warts and all, and surely we should apply that to everybody. I think everybody should disclose, and it goes back to what Jane said about Zoom. How wonderful it is to see people as real people, not these tight-ass professionals. What does that? When people are real with each other, that's where we build community. We've got to start being more real.
Yeah, it was really good to Amanda saying, I didn't understand this before because I don't know enough about the world, that about making films with people you love or have the potential to love, and doing it devotionally. And I think what Amanda did, and Huw, by working that way, we became very comfortable with around us, and they kind of grew the love and have become part of, instead of this remote viewer. And so there is that feeling of all of us are connected in a way that can never go, really. It's fab.
Right. Say hello to Kelly. Kelly was.
Hello, Kelly. I love you too.
She's one of us. So, anything else that anyone wants to add to this? It's been fantastic. I mean, shall we think of, because it's 2 hours now that we're talking, and it's.
I'm out of words.
You're out of words.
And I might need a catheter fitted if I'm here much longer.
I've been there. I've done that one.
With me at the moment. That's why I had to keep disappearing. My dogs are playing bloody Merry Hell at the moment.
Yeah, my dogs also want to come out.
Yeah. we had a basket war earlier on because one of the dogs had the other basket. That's why I had to disappear.
Yes, Amanda?
Have you said what you want to say? Because you've been very generously holding the space for us and asking us. But what about you? Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I think that, of course, there would be tons of things, but
you can't think of any right now.
No, well, I think that for me, this recovery as lifelong, and all the things that you have said today that relate to this, that relate to this, relate to this, but also to the creative process. So it's like it's funny, but it's like recovery is just almost the same thing as the creative process. The creative process is constantly evolving and moving like the bicycle, you know? And the state that you need to be in is just that state of vulnerability, of submission that you were saying today or yesterday. I don't know. Amanda, you said
yes,
about sort of giving yourself to, and it's like art is so good with recovery because art proposes this sort of, okay, you know, I mean, my own method is so structured, you know, but every time that I hold a workshop, I just have no idea what's going to happen. And also I keep being challenged by participants and by their stories. And in this case, there was also the research part. And it was perhaps more collaborative than other projects that I've ever done. And that also was challenging, but so enriching and so interesting. And no wonder that this has resonated with me throughout the year, since, you know, it's 4 years that we did this project. So I'm still, as I said, in my PhD, Wonderland was crucial. And how Wonderland allowed me to discuss as well how we sort of reverse the power roles as well, you know? Because I'm very sensitive to power roles. I come from a military family, you know? and sometimes I tend a little bit to, you know, to command, you know? But the collaborative part was like taking me somewhere else. And I was very challenged. And also the fact that then, of course, there were 10 people that then some left, not a lot, like 2, 3 left, you know, the process, which is natural because it's just natural, and it's good that people, it's like emotional safeguarding that they decide to leave. So it was fine, and we are still in touch, and they, you know, so it was also part of the process, no? These sort of interruptions, but so it's been, yeah, no wonder that it has resonated, and it has been a very important part of my research. And I keep, you know, telling Mark, when are we going to work together again, you know? And I'm jealous that I wasn't part of that project and the other part of the project, you know? So Mark knows that sometimes, oh, why, you know, I wanted to be part, you know? But of course, it can't be, because, yeah, it's good that other artists have the opportunity to work with such fantastic people. That was for all of you.
Oh, so lovely to be together again. I mean, it's just so amazing that after 4 years, and some of us have seen each other in that time, and some of us less so. We've all seen each other a bit, but not, you know, like hugely. Yeah. That we just came in yesterday when we were doing our technical practice. It's just like, just straight there. It's just there. You don't have to. There's no warming up or anything. Woomph. You're just back in it. It's great.
Yeah. There's understoodness.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, that was also, no, but for me, it was like, sometimes I've always had problems relating to others. And through my work, it's like sort of easier, but I'm not so, I don't know, funny as you are. It's hard for me to be funny or to be relaxed when I'm relating to others, you know? So yesterday I was so stressed out because of the technical part that...
But at the same time, you just felt like you were so able to to let us also be ourselves all together, and including you. It just, it was very noticeable. Maybe this is not for the public broadcasting bit, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
You
thanks a lot.
were stressed in a different way than all of us were stressed before when we were doing one-to-one. You know, we're all in different places, I suppose is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So how about how do we want to package it and close and our closure?
Just to say thank you to everybody for listening, I guess, and hope that they take something from it, and then afterwards maybe there's lots of things out there on Google, Facebook pages, websites. There's much more out there, and I kind of need to go because I need to attend to my other role as carer for my mother. So, and I'm overdue.
Oh.
Michaela, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just to say how, you know, wonderful it is to sort of relive it again. You know, tonight I'm going to spend a lot of time reflecting on it, actually, which is great. And you know, like Mark, I hope everybody's got something out of it. You know, even if they are cynics like I was, it's really, really worth exploring.
Yeah.
Amanda, you want to say something to the public and to us?
No, just to echo. Echo.
Jane.
Oh, I've loved being with you, and I'm going to be reflecting like Michaela said, but I've learned some new things, and I'm going to be thinking particularly about some of the things Amanda said. Creative undergoing, was that a term you used? Which
the creativity of undergoing is
fascinating.
Tim Ingold, and it's about, as Christina was saying, it's about submission. Instead of mastering a process, you submit to a process.
And I'm going to be mulling on some of these things for a long time to come. It's been absolutely great, so thank you. And I really do hope that that anybody who's watched it tonight or watches it in the future may get turned on by it. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Turned on and excited, and think about the possibilities.
Absolutely. It's going to be all the video. It's going to be on my profile, on the Specs page, and on my YouTube channel. So it's everywhere.
Brilliant.
And thanks, Christina, for proposing it and for doing all the technical stuff. And I guess just making it easy for us just to perform out of the comforts of our own bedrooms, kitchens, offices, or wherever else we are.
Yeah, thanks to COVID, we have done this, because otherwise, I don't know if we.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had the money
No,
for the flight.
Public and making all this public. Really, this is something really very important.
Yeah.
And you know, one thing we don't know is who below this image is naked or not.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh,
are we fully clothed or partly naked?
Oh, we can strip down from the waist down.
Sometimes you must leave a little bit of mystery.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. Big hug to all. It was fantastic to talk.
Bye.
Take care.
Wonderful Christmas, wonderful solstice, wonderful everything.
Yeah.
And lots of hope for the next year.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.